Welcome to the Blair Dunkley experience, where we help busy entrepreneurs looking to break through, making small business or small shifts in your thinking using mind models, which enhance yourself to gain the clarity needed to accomplish your goals faster and more easily. So we're constantly looking at how to leverage people and how to give them thinking strategy, mind models. And those mind models are critical. I'm just, for those of you that'll be new here and or hearing us on Facebook and never heard this before, I am not a fan of mindset. I used to, in my late 20s, early 30s, used to train on mindset. Until I had, well, actually, it was my late 20s where I was training on mindset from mid 20s to late 20s for 3 years. And I had a situation happen to me where my dad wound up going into a coma. That personal tragedy sort of caused my brain to kick mind model or mindset to the curb and forced me on a path down to develop mind models. It spun out of research done by the government of Canada, where they spent $42 million and 5 years researching coping, problem solving, and success skills. And those skill sets that they found were, and especially their model of research, is what I adopted. I modified some of the life skills, but then transformed and discovered other mind models on my own, doing our own research at Life Skills Colleges, where I started off founding the college with my mother and Vicki Jolin, and went through to eventually become president of the college itself. So we were recognized nationally and internationally. In our day, we were one of the largest, if not the largest, life skills colleges in the world. 80% of 100% of our clientele was referred to us by the government, and 80% of that was individuals that were potentially suicidal. So we had a lot of people with a lot of mental health issues that we dealt with. And Jamie Allen has put her hand up and said she'd attend here. So we can promote her. Thank you, Jamie. And primarily here, the whole point of bringing this whole process together was to develop a way that would actually work well and consistently, even though a person was going through difficulties. So I didn't want a personal tragedy or some form of difficulty in a person's life to cause your mindset to get kicked to the curb. I thought that's not a very robust model. That's not very effective for people. So I went, that just doesn't work. It shouldn't work like that. You should be, when you learn something, when you paid good money to get trained up like I did, and then I charged money for other people to be able to apply the training that I got trained on to train other people, this stuff should actually work. I found out it didn't. And it was painful in so many ways to me that I was very fortunate. I was at the college still. My dad went into, like I mentioned before, went into a coma for 14 years before he passed. So I had to figure out how to cope. Fortunately, life skills had coping strategies for me, but the mindset stuff was not working. So what do you do differently? You start focusing on what works, not what doesn't work. So when you focus on what works, you start taking a look at how do you build more and more success on the things that you're doing effectively, and you start documenting exactly what's working and starting to figure out, how do I change myself? And asking questions more and more and more effectively. I had already started doing some fundamental research earlier on an area called question concepts, which is basically every thought that you have in your brain is filtered through your question concepts. And by the way, for those of you that see me profiling, or have seen me, or been profiled by me, or have not been profiled yet, may like to be profiled by me, one of the key things that I wind up doing is I don't listen to what people say per se. I listen to how people say it. And that's done through the mind model of the question concepts. And when you listen to how people are saying what they're saying, they're filtering it through and flowing the information through different question concepts, which gives me how they thought it through, literally how they thought it through. And that has been a critical piece of the mind models and a fundamental underpinning. We don't teach that here. It takes too long on the webinars. But what we do is we take a look at the other mind models that spun out of all of that research, and things like evaluation versus judgment, content versus process. It goes on and on. There's well over 100 mind models that are in there. Some of them are comparative distinctions. Most of them, and that's most of them, but some of them also are process distinctions, such as the 3 Ps, or the PPC of questioning. So we have the first P is prove, the second one is position, the C is curiosity. So we have PPC, and the whole thing here is proving and positioning are all internal things that you do here, and curiosity is external. So the concept of internal versus external is also critical. And that's another lesson that I actually have just finished doing up, or editing a video on for one of our clients. Anyway, that's a little bit of background here. That's a driver for me. This is a description of, I am fed up with people saying mindset's everything, because I know it's not, from very personal experience, and now talking to quite a few hundred people that have come up and said, yeah, I can't seem to hold on to mindset, and I know it's important. And I go, no, it's not. It's not as important as what people claim it to be. And it's a claim now. It's not a fact. But for over 30 years now, I've been testing mind models and putting them to work, and they have an 80% success rate. So they work. They're not perfect, but I'm not claiming perfection. I'm claiming that if you use them 3 times in a row, the probability is you will get 100% likelihood, or 99.999% likelihood, that you will find a way to make it effective. And that is in any condition. It doesn't matter if you believe them, believe in yourself, don't believe in yourself. You're in a very positive situation, you're in a very negative situation. Just use the mind model, and it works 80+% of the time. So that's different than mindset. Anyway, enough of that. Yeah, I am thrilled to have you guys on board here. So tonight, it's all about developing your skills. So what skills have you guys, any one of the 3 of you, been developing lately? And just share, because this is going to be me working at helping you with how you're thinking through skill development in yourselves. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Jamie, you're back here, and you've been away for the longest, so you're going to get picked on first.
And I'm trying to think, because I really am trying to develop several.
Pick one, or all of them. I don't care. I'll tell you which one.
Well, I mean, I'm still working on kind of listening more and taking cues from the person.
Okay.
I also had an interesting thing happen to me, because one of the things is not reacting, and how I react, and learning, because I teach it. It's you doing it. I'm really good at teaching it to others. But I had somebody that pushed a button of mine. And oh my goodness, I didn't realize that I still had that in me, and it reminded me of when my daughter used to push buttons.
Okay.
I lost it. I mean, I lost, and I had to be honest, they so crossed a boundary. It's ridiculous. But it bothered me more, not their boundary that they crossed, but how I reacted.
Interesting.
And so it kept me up, and it really wasn't what they did. It was how I reacted, which is different, because used to, it would have kept me up on what they did.
Right.
And so I've grown enough to at least get to that.
So the quick question here is, how are you managing yourself and turning this into a learning opportunity?
Well, I got on tonight, so you could tell me.
Okay, I can coach you through this.
So because they also it questioned my integrity or some, and that's huge for me. Huge.
Yes.
And so it just hit a button, and I literally lost it and screamed it. And I'm just like, oh, and so that bothered me. And I realized that even as much work as I've done on that, and I'm doing great, and I'm a lot less reactive. Mm-hmm. There's obviously more work to do.
So let's create some strategies and skill sets here, because I'm sure that this is a fairly common problem where people react or overreact to a situation in their life. And it's something, if this is something that you guys see is a problem with you guys out there, or have you ever had this happen to you, and you're on the call list here, just raise your hand or let us know in the comments, please. Yes. Okay, Rebecca, yes.
I've been triggered.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we got 2 or 3 people here. Let's dive into it a little bit here. So first thing is, how are you managing this? Okay, John, I'm going to pick on you. You heard the story. Okay. What did you hear from what Jamie said? What's your first blush at this? Because what this takes is deep listening skill sets.
Yes.
Okay. So what did you hear? Dwayne, you're next. You're on deck. So start thinking. Just warning you.
Well, the fact that when her integrity was questioned, which I can relate to having a reaction to that, but I would say that it may have triggered a little bit of safety versus comfort or something like that. Is an identity, a threat to her identity. I would say she may have a big piece of her identity tied to that, her self-identity, so that when that was questioned, it felt very threatening, and that's caused the big reaction.
More than likely, true. Now, Dwayne, can you take that down another level?
Well, I was hearing her that she was more concerned about how she responded as opposed to what they actually did to her, what her response to it was. So I'm kind of wondering if maybe it's like thinking versus feeling or something like that.
So which one was triggered, the thinking or the feeling?
I would say the feeling.
Exactly. It was emotional.
It was very.
Exactly. She literally told us that, but she didn't say it that way. She described the situation where she lost control. So what was the dominant thing, the cognitive or the emotional? And it was definitely the emotional side, not the thinking side, that actually went in there. So when it's the emotional side, and we're going to take a look at skill development, what do you think you might need to do differently, Jamie, or even John? What's the interrupt pattern? And actually, Trevor, you can jump in here too.
Breathing would have helped.
Breathing doesn't hurt to start off with. It's there. What does breathing do?
Interrupts that emotional thought, and I think it also fuels your brain.
It does. It fuels your brain. It interrupts because of what?
Because of the oxygen.
No.
And the time. I mean, it gives you a time break.
Yes, but no.
If you're talking about deep breathing, it stimulates the vagus nerve, and that stimulates the, I think, the sympathetic nerve system.
Yes, that's all true, but that's not necessarily the key trigger.
It changes your behavior, so that it's being more proactive versus just reactive.
And so your brain has to move away from what it is to think about breathing before you take your first breath. Okay, even before you've taken your first breath, your change state has already begun.
Okay.
So doing anything like that, breathing is particularly effective. You're right about the vagus nerve and everything else there. All of these things that we're doing are a cascade event. But the thing that happened right before you got to breathe, you changed something. And before you changed something, what occurred?
Identification, recognition.
Of how did that identification occur? What caused the identification to occur? What must she have done subconsciously?
Asked a question.
Bingo. Subconsciously, she asked the question. Like I told you before, like this is going to come down to an indirect way. I'm not really teaching question concepts, but I'm teaching the consequence of question concepts, the benefits of question concepts. By asking a question, it triggers her brain to respond very differently. And there's nothing else that will cause that triggering effect to occur as quickly, as efficiently as that subconscious question. And more importantly, if you do what with the question, what makes it even more effective? Dwayne, if you do what with the question?
Internalize it.
And do what?
Evaluate it.
Not quite. You're warm, but not quite. Jamie.
Well, I guess my question is, what question? Is this a question I'm asking myself that causes...
No. It doesn't matter what question it is yet.
I mean, is this a question that, what I'm saying is this something that is helping me stop what I'm doing, or did a question make me do what I was doing? That's where I'm...
Well,
both of those are true.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct, Trevor. Both of those are true.
What I think you were going for, Blair, was consciously asking the question.
Correct. That's exactly what I was going for. Well done.
That I was consciously asking a question?
You weren't consciously asking the question.
No, Jamie. What he was asking Dwayne, when he was asking what he could do, and Dwayne said he could evaluate it. What Blair was really going there for was to make it conscious instead of just if it happens to happen or if it's subconscious. Consciously asking the question, like I would think a good one would be, what might I do differently?
That's you know my stuff. That's what I do all the time.
Okay.
And
it's
so
one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I wasn't breathing or thinking. I was just doing. And until later, I was saying, okay, I mean, it was exactly, what could I have done differently?
No. Like, think about that in terms of what could I have done, or rephrase it with what might I have done differently? What might I have done? Okay. So right now it goes back to the webinar on 3 magic words, which is, might specifically and now. Right. And might is one of those 3 magic words. So think about this and just do it. Put yourself back in that frame of mind. Yeah, way too easy. I know.
Yeah, I'm still ah,
Frothing. Okay, I get it. There's a little foam and smoke coming out of your ears.
Yeah. What I could have done.
Might have done. Might.
Sorry, might.
No. Seriously, what I want you to do is, can you work with me? Okay. So what I'd like you to do is just be aware right now, just sort of get a sense of yourself, how you feel, like center yourself like you're doing. Okay. And now ask yourself the question, what could I have done? And don't answer it. Notice the feelings that are generated, the emotional state or the state, not just emotions, but the cognitive and the state, all of you, emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, even, if you will. And just think about that for a second and go, okay, so what could I have done? How do you feel primarily?
It calms you down.
Okay, it calms you down. But what could I have done? Think about that.
What could I have done?
See, listen to that. Did you hear that? That ugh. Okay, now.
Okay, yeah, no.
Don't go any further. Okay. What might I have done?
What might I have done? Oh, I can see the difference now.
Okay, what just happened?
Yeah.
No. Not yeah. What?
No. It literally, what could you have done kind of put you into a argument with yourself in your head. What might I have done is softer. It's how do I put it? It's not like a forced thing. You're having to think through it and make more sense out of it, I guess. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does.
Okay.
So,
because could is a very hard word.
Yes.
And so it makes me go, I don't really want to do anything.
So when you're developing your own skills and you're coulding on yourself, I could have done this, I could have done that. Do you feel more resourceful or less resourceful, more stuck, less stuck?
No,
what is
you feel more stuck, I think, because it puts you in the past.
Exactly. Defeated?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because you start beating yourself up some, like, I could have done this and I should have done that, you know.
And notice how you went coulda, shoulda. And that coulda, shoulda. And I'm doing this because shoulds tend to be even more negative, deeper into self-deprecating behaviors that you'll do to yourself when you start shoulding on yourself, not just coulding, but shoulding.
And yes.
Okay.
So might is, it gives you some freedom, and it's more of what I will do in the next time, the future, if that would happen. So you're not beating yourself up.
Because what does the question might do?
Gives you power to change.
Power. What else?
Options.
Options or possibilities. The two P's of might are power and possibilities.
Okay.
And what your subconscious brain has is the ability to cannot separate all the meanings of words. So it's powerful possibilities. Your conscious mind determines which meaning you apply to that scenario, but the subconscious mind doesn't operate that way. It operates off all meanings all the time. So when you might yourself, you now have given yourself way more ability to choose, literally, functionally choose how to transform yourself more effectively. And that is powerful. That's very powerful.
Okay, good.
So what worked for you about that so far? And actually, John, what did you pull from that so far?
The part that you just did, the sound of, saying it to yourself, could versus might, and how they feel. what the thing that came up for me was could seems like it's usually preceded by an if. It's like the second half of an if then. And like there's some external or other condition that has to be met relative to the could, whereas might is just stands on its own. It doesn't have an if attached to it.
Right.
Very different, different words.
Because there's possibilities, and the meaning of that transforms it. And you're right, Rebecca, it loads emotion. It's a why state. Absolutely true. It's loading, that could is loading emotions, and shoulds do it even more. Whereas mights go after what? Like mights create lists of possibilities in a person's mind. What might I do? Well, I could do this or this or this or this. It's not, what could I do? Well, yeah, I could have done this. I could have done that. I could have done the other thing. I could have done. So now it's all past based. Mm-hmm. And it tends to literally, as Rebecca said, it loads it more emotionally, which it does. Yeah. And shoulds are even worse because now, yeah, my dad, I should have done this for my dad. My mom wants me to do this. My brother wants me. I should have done this for my brother. I should have been better. I've been told I'm such a jerk. I should have known better, which is not effective.
Well, I know I was, because of the mind models, afterward, and I really just sat up, and at first I really was doing that could, should thing and was kind of beating myself up. And then I remembered that I'd just done a live on judgment versus evaluation on my page, and I'm like, okay, let's not judge. And even though I said could tonight, I realize now talking to you that I did move myself out of it. Not instantly, but right. At least I was conscious of it to not beat myself up too much, and started to evaluate what might I have done differently.
Exactly.
But yeah, it floored. It literally, I think what threw me more was that it came out of nowhere. I mean, it just shocked me because I thought I had kind of moved through that type of reaction. And
so what do you think might have been the triggering event, if you don't mind?
No, they crossed a huge boundary, and no matter what I said, they weren't listening.
I doubt that was the only thing that was triggering.
Well, they called me a liar.
I know you relatively well, and I would suggest that was the scenario in which the trigger was launched. But I doubt very much if that was functionally the trigger. So was it a man or a woman?
Woman.
Was it her tone of voice?
Oh no, she was very calm.
No. Doesn't matter what state she was in.
No, yes, it was very patronizing.
Thank you. That's what. Now, does patronizing, have you been in scenarios where somebody who's patronizing you gets your goat? Pardon me?
Makes me crazy.
Makes you crazy. Great. So patronizing. Was she, by the way, this points out another thing that happens is a lot of people think that if you're going to get into an argument with somebody, you should remain calm and not to keep everybody down. And that's actually not accurate when you're dealing with people. You actually will escalate the reaction when somebody becomes what's referred to as super reasonable. Mm-hmm. They will push buttons. And that super reasonableness will more than likely throw people over the edge and cause them to get extremely angry with you, and you're not upset, but you're triggering the upset.
Well, and that's what she did. And anyway.
Well, with that,
it wasn't a pretty picture.
The other probability of that is she probably had a 60 to 70% chance of she knew what she was doing and she was doing it with intention.
She was. And she even said that to somebody.
getting your goat intentionally.
Yes.
So that's part of the whole thing where, so what might you do differently when you start feeling that level of, I'm going to just call it what it is. It's an attack, that level of an attack. So what might you do differently now?
Wow. I mean, that's a good question, because that's what I've been trying to think of. Because, well, one, I've already put boundaries up around this person, stricter boundaries, and so that hopefully doesn't happen.
I understand that, but are you always in control of that?
But no, that's what I'm saying. So but I think I have to, not engage somehow.
That's easier said than done. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out how to help you figure out how not to engage.
I don't know. I'll just be honest. I have like
Great. Okay.
gone through
back in there. Well, Trevor, I was going to say, what is your idea that you might choose to, how do you help Jamie not engage? How might that work using some strategies that we've discussed here? Not just the mind model, but a strategy.
Well, I'm tempted to say just try to end the conversation without like totally losing yourself.
That's one. Okay. So I'm not going to say it's the one that I would go after, but it is a decent one, without a doubt.
Can I interrupt real quick?
Go for it.
The person, it wasn't what they said. It is so much as what they did. And they invaded my space into my house, bringing something over without my permission and just put it in my garage. And I'm trying to sell my house. And so, and as much as I was like, you need to get it out, they were not listening. And they were literally just railroading me, I guess. So I lost it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. And I was understanding it as somebody questioning your integrity about something, or.
Well, but then they said that I told them they could, and which I didn't, because why would I bring their stuff into my house I'm trying to sell? But anyway, so then they started saying I was lying, and it just went from there.
Okay.
So, without going into the story of this, which is not overly relevant to the strategy.
That's fine. I just didn't know if it mattered if it was what they said or did, because I had no control and they weren't listening to what I was saying.
Okay, just 1 second here. Dwayne, John, Trevor, what did Jamie just say that gives us a hint?
I'm not sure what she just said,
correct, Jamie.
but I was thinking going after result. What did you say, Jamie? Control?
Yes, control.
Oh, she said she wasn't sure how else she could control it.
No, she was not in control.
I wasn't right. I was not. I am a control freak.
Yep.
Okay, I know that. I've spent much money figuring that out, and I'm working on it.
Yep. And you were not in control.
I was not in control.
Cool. So, what might you do differently next time?
Let go of the control and deal with it after the fact, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know.
If you get to the point where you feel like you're going to get triggered, because I know from many situations in my life where I've been triggered, that there is an emotional charge that happens prior to the trigger being pulled in your brain, basically where everything is now a cascade event where you can't sort of get out of it.
Yep.
That whole trigger piece there is time to notice the buildup.
Okay.
Now, it can be a few seconds or a few minutes, but you can feel the buildup.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I wind up doing is I wind up asking a question.
Okay.
And what am I willing to do right now differently, or what do I need to understand about them so that I can diffuse this situation?
Okay.
Now, in some scenarios, and your scenario is likely one of those, where no matter what you say or do, they want to do what they're doing regardless.
Correct.
Right. One of the things that I wind up doing is, because it is a situational scenario where it's property, literally physical property of stuff, is just state black and white. I do not give you permission to store this here under any circumstances. If I have done so in the past, the time is long since gone. Please remove this. If not, it will be removed. And so this is not a place for you to store it. You do need to find another place, period.
Yes.
They will have a go at you. You repeat that one more time. And you also add, and there is no further discussion because my mind is totally made up. And I literally now turn around and walk away.
Yeah.
Because there is no point in having a discussion with this person because they're not being reasonable.
That is correct.
And sometimes if I'm forced into a discussion where they run around and get in front of me, I ask them, is your behavior right now to intimidate me or to be reasonable?
That's a good question.
That's a very good question, because they don't realize that they're trying to intimidate me and it's not working, and they think that they're trying to be reasonable. They sometimes flip it around on to me and say, are you being reasonable? I say, well, as far as I can tell, I am being reasonable, and turn around and keep going. My situation is such, my situation. I'm selling my home. This is moving forward. Had this been in another scenario, that's it. That's fine. If you want to talk to me reasonably about helping you brainstorm ideas of where else you might store this, I can do that, but it's not here under any circumstance. It is not here.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say when I said my daughter, I haven't been pushed like that since my daughter. That's what we learned how to do with her, and just state what we needed to do and whatever time frame she was going to do it, and then just turn around and walk off. And it really worked well. I obviously, in this years that she's left home, got out of practice. But The interesting thing too is that my husband, I had him take over. And that's exactly what he did. And he said, so, I mean, you have to cut it off. And so then I started saying, okay, why is that hard for me? It's like,
well, I hate to break it back to the question concepts since I haven't taught them, but the why is the way you're processing that information. It is a endless loop trap in your brain. Correct. So that you can't get out of it. And Tim said control versus influence, and this is absolutely correct. In this whole area, it is influence that you're actually exerting, and you're controlling yourself. You're not allowing yourself to be controlled by somebody else's influence.
Got it. Okay. Well,
So,
I mean,
go
it was
ahead.
interesting because I went from beating myself up to asking really good questions of myself to get to that. And so I was kind of excited to get on here tonight and say, I used something. I'm not sure if I've used it all right, but I have at least made progress in that thought pattern. And so now I'm down to, I want to work on the loop, that why. And I wasn't sure which one I was supposed to work on with that one.
Well, let's not work on the loop of the why, because that is a ineffective loop.
Okay.
The effective loop is the question that I've been asking you. And if people have been paying attention to it, so what might you do differently? And that's the question. And so what might you do? What might you do differently? What might you do now? What might you do specifically now? What else might you do? These are all the variations of the same question.
And so what you're saying is by doing that, it pretty much answers the other.
It does. It requires your brain to do that. And the interesting part of this is in developing skills, those are the questions that you have to ask yourself. You can start with a how as well. How effectively was I? How effective might I have been? How might I be more effective? Okay. What did I do that was effective? What did I do that was ineffective? What do I want to stop doing? What do I want to do more of? What might I do? Like the only time I don't use might is what might I stop doing and what might I do more of?
Okay.
But those are just hard evaluation questions, not judgment questions. Right. Those are evaluation questions.
Okay.
And the rest is to get your brain into a powerful possibility mindset of looking at powerful possibilities.
Okay, cool. No, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. So cool. Okay. So that's the big chunk of what did we learn here? Dwayne, John, Trevor, you as well, Jamie, what did we learn here this evening? So let's start breaking it down, but let's take a look at this. This is a microcosm, a small little skill development that we went through. Where did you, Jamie, have to start? Let's start off with you breaking down and evaluating your learnings.
I had to, learn not to ask why and look at asking how I could or might do something differently. But really take a deep look at what that meant. And what you said was like it really was kind of a boundary around yourself. You were just, cutting it off. You're stating your position. And
so what's the first thing that you need to do? Let's break it into steps, because okay. you're jamming steps in and they're sort of this is fine for you, but my job here is to put some sort of order to the chaos.
Oh no, good.
And let's organize this stuff because it's not random. So what's the first step?
After breathing.
No, actually before breathing.
Before breathing.
Yeah, because breathing means that you've done something even before breathing.
Ask the question.
Bingo. Dwayne, build on that if you don't mind.
Rebecca said in the chat, pattern interruption with a question.
Right. Absolutely spot on, Rebecca. Okay, so Dwayne.
Well, I think it takes you from, like you were talking about, it takes you out of a judgment and puts you more into an evaluation.
That's absolutely true. And that's done through what first? Curiosity, absolutely. And so when you do that, John, what occurs?
You have you shift into a more resourceful state.
How come? And not only how come, but what occurs in shifting to that more resourceful state?
Clarity.
How?
From subconscious to conscious?
Yes, but that's not really, I want to know not a resulting description of a process. I want to know the process.
Possibilities, like opportunities and possibilities.
From doing what?
Well, from getting resourceful, it opens up possibilities.
How do we do that? I'm trying to get you guys to loop back to something simple that's
asking the question again.
Right. By asking the question again is the perfect answer, Trevor. That's like spot on, because it's not just asking the question once, but it's asking the question as many times as it takes for you to do what?
To make a change.
Pardon me?
A change of behavior.
Right. To get that pattern interrupt with a question. You have to be able to get yourself out of that. And Rebecca nailed it and just said pattern interrupt with a question. Right. But curiosity is part of the questioning process. And if you do not engage with a curious mindset, you will be there trying to engage with questions that prove or position that are not curious. Okay? And then you're sucked into the whole debate.
Yeah, that engagement part.
The engagement part for yourself,
right.
You have to be able to manage yourself. Like you can control yourself and you can influence others. And when you feel like you're being controlled by somebody else, it's only because you've subconsciously or consciously given them permission to control you.
Yeah.
And the way that you do it is by actually not taking control of yourself.
So really getting curious is retaking control of yourself. It's a way of
absolutely
recentering and saying, okay, I'm in charge of, I'm asking the questions here, kind of.
Well, not quite, because that's a tell.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah. But going, hey.
But I mean, internally.
How am I behaving? Am I behaving the way I want to? Is this the way I want my life to go? No, it's not. What might I do? What question might I ask myself first so I can gain A, control of myself, and B, if I am sort of semi in control, because I notice that I am curious, I can now switch that to the point of saying, oh, hey, maybe if I ask myself a question, what might I do differently now? And that curiosity piece. And when that occurs in your brain and you say, what might I do differently? I might try understanding them and having them understand me instead of fighting back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So
yes.
I'd ask a question of them and say, what would you like me to understand about this scenario? And they go, well, I'm dropping this off. It's in your garage. That's all I need you to understand. Well, is this a one-sided conversation? No, I'm just dropping it off. It's not even a conversation. Well, I have a massive problem with this because that does not appear to me to be reasonable. Is it reasonable that you just leave things here on my property and walk away without a discussion about it? It's not reasonable to me. And notice that I'm picking on one word there. What's the key word I'm using there? Reasonable. How come reasonable?
Because reasonable is kind of like the center line. It's a community thing. So everybody wants to be reasonable. Everybody wants to kind of be on a level playing field.
We are social beings,
mm-hmm.
and we are trained. Actually, we are DNA predisposed to reasonableness, because if we're not reasonable, we get kicked out by the crowd, by the tribe, and excommunicated if you were, and that's like the worst thing. So out of these three conditions, which is the worst? Loved, hated, or ignored? Ignored.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we can be hated and it's not as bad as being ignored. So reasonableness is always about pulling this in to a more reasonable point. And it means ignored is it's out there. Hated, you're not being ignored because you're involved in a argument. And to be reasonable, you can't be debating things. You have to be, loved or liked or whatever. There's got to be some kind of community connection for you to be strongly in. Loved, hated, or ignored, to get that love back, to get that understanding, it's got to be in alignment with the group, with the tribe, as it were. So we all have those hardwired into us. So that's key. So overcoming those issues help us do that. Trevor, do you want to just read out here what Rebecca just wrote here?
It was a while ago. She said, that's a powerful statement. Blair never thought about it that way. Subconsciously giving them control because we are not controlling ourselves.
You always have a control issue. And that is huge. When we don't assert our own control over ourselves, we have abdicated our own control, which gives room for somebody else to take it. And we don't notice it. We don't notice that we've given it up. Like, did you notice it until after the fact, Jamie?
What? No, I was too much in it.
Yeah, because now you're fighting a battle against somebody, and that battle is inside of you.
Yeah, it was nuts.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's crazy, that kind of scenario. And it's humorous after the fact, but terrible in the moment.
I know. I thought, oh my God, I'm so glad a neighbor didn't drive by or something. They'd have slopped me up.
Yeah. This crazy woman here.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was a little scary for me.
Yeah, it is. Yes.
So
well, that's when you lose control and somebody else is around, they get to fill your void of control and you feel out of control.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So back to this whole piece here and wrapping this up, the skill set, number one skill set is ask a question with curiosity.
Got it.
Get curious and ask a question. Okay. Step two, define your result, what you desire. What is acceptable? Step three is seek understanding. Seek to understand them. When you've defined what it is that you have, you don't tell them what it is. You hold that in your head. And what you wind up doing is you don't necessarily do anything. You ask a question, knowing what your limits are in your head, your boundaries are, if you will, and you then ask them, let me just understand what's going on. Share with me your perception of what the situation is. And they will do that gladly because they want to be understood. 99% of the time, they want to be understood. So they will share. And now you get to hear, because you know what your boundary is, where it aligns, whether or not it's reasonable or not. Are they making a reasonable request in a methodology or a way, a scenario that is just apparently unreasonable? Or is it in fact unreasonable because it's now outside of the parameter? So are they just doing it to you in a way that's causing you to react, which sometimes they can do, which at the end of the day, it's not a crazy statement. It's not irritating. It's just how they said it, not what they said. And you can have what's referred to as violent arguments or violent agreements. I mean, so you have a violent agreement. I mean, I've had lots of those with Melissa over the years, is It's just how we're saying it. And we're actually agreeing very violently on the same subject. So when we do that, it's fine, it works. And then the next piece is we start shifting that to define what, and you ask, is it reasonable? You use the word reasonable because there's a thing in court in British common law called the reasonable man theory. And the reasonable man theory is what a judge does when there is no jury. He's up on the bench, he's adjudicating, and he has to take a look at the case from the point of view of a reasonable man who knows the law. And that's the perspective that he's supposed to take. Okay, so he removes his bias and prejudices and takes a look at it from a societal stance and makes a determination using the law within reason. And reason is very different than realistic. Realistic, it's always true for you. Whatever you deem to be realistic is true to you because it's internal, it's in your mind. Reasonable is externally verifiable. You can check with other people to find out if it's not collectively reasonable, it's not reasonable. So it has to be externally verifiable, okay, by others. And then you do everything else that I said in terms of how you tactically manage the scenario. But everything else was like this. These are the steps for the internal states to occur. Okay, does that start making sense to you guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, so what did you guys get really quick in terms of steps?
I've got one is ask questions with curiosity.
Yep.
Define results.
By the way, it's not just ask questions, it's ask what or how questions with curiosity.
What or how, okay. And define results within your boundaries or what you're willing to accept, and that's not spoken, it's just what you get.
Yes.
Right? And then you seek to understand by asking them a question and using reasonable in the question.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Evaluate and ask again.
Bingo. Rinse and repeat at that point. Yep. And most of the time, 70 to 80% of the time, that will work. That will diffuse a scenario and cause people to get into alignment.
Cool.
And we learned on this one not to question Jamie's integrity.
Yeah.
Right. Do not.
Do not do that.
Do not do that.
Oh
my gosh. I missed you guys.
Yep. Likewise, Jamie, likewise. Cool. Okay, so those are the steps. Those are the primary steps. Does somebody want to bang those out into the chat, just so we have it written down? Because the chat stays with this, does it not, Trevor?
Not really. It'll just create a file somewhere for us or me somewhere.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, okay. Okay, cool. So I thought it might be helpful for somebody else to just be able to bang those out when they
could be added as a comment to the Facebook video once it's posted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. It's already on Facebook. Okay. Jamie's getting it.
Thank you, Jamie. Really appreciate it. Perfect. So that worked very well. So again, we'll just, Dwayne, we'll start wrapping up with you while Jamie's typing. And so what worked for you today on this? How effective was this for you?
The effectiveness was great because I was able to really start grasping the stacking one model on top of the next one, on top of the next one, on top of the next one, and how it all kind of plays into solving problems.
Mm-hmm.
Giving you a more clear direction on seeking the clarity or seeking the control that you need in the situations that you're involved with.
You know what? I want to reinforce control, but from a self point of view. So it's not about controlling the situation. It's about being able to manage and control yourself in that situation. Because Jamie made it very, very clear early on that she was out of control and she had lost control.
Yeah.
And the other person was supposedly in control of her only because she stepped out of her own self-control.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's going back to what Rebecca was saying about we subconsciously gave the other person the control that we were lacking.
Yes. Yeah, simply by not being there. Like that's the point that I was making, and that Rebecca commented on very, very astutely. It is so critical because that whole way that you think you're always in control of yourself, but when you abdicate, give up your control, then what you wind up doing is, if somebody else is astute, practiced, or manipulative enough, they will step in and take control. And when they do that, it's usually against you and in favor of them, unfortunately.
Hey, make sure that those are correct, please.
So, perfect. So ask what and how questions with curiosity. That is correct. Define the result within the boundaries. What is acceptable? Not spoken, but internal. Yes, absolutely critical. Seek to understand by asking them a question, using reasonable in the question. And it better be a what or how question. So that, again, those need to be what's and how questions in there, not why. No matter what, it cannot be a why, unless you want to turn it into a scenario where you are setting yourself up to be dumped on.
Yeah.
Okay, because that's 90% of the time, that's what will happen. So the fourth step here is evaluation and ask another question, rinse and repeat. Perfect. And I believe this is Rebecca said, when heated conversations happen, if we don't take control of ourselves, nothing changes. It just escalates because both parties are positioning and trying to prove. Absolutely true. That's the prove position and curiosity. I just was, as I was saying this earlier today, I was reviewing another mind model that I recorded some time ago, and the mind model was where it was prove, position, and process. And I kept on coming back to that, where that the curiosity, if you don't use curiosity, so I have replaced the process with curiosity because it's more fundamental. However, right at the same time that you start using curiosity, you are building a process flow. Okay, so these two things in your brain are inseparable. They're bound. And that is critical. When you start using that curiosity in there with questions, you can start developing your own skill sets more effectively. That's one of the fundamental things about skill development. And we can take our skill development 2 or 3 levels deeper way faster, and it takes less experience for us to learn deeply how to engage with our skill sets that we are developing when we take this approach of questioning ourselves with curiosity, or questioning others with curiosity around any skill set that we're using.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think that's what I found that I started doing was question afterward. And that because I was curious on what the heck was going on.
Exactly.
And so that was neat to know that instead of just going, I really stopped and evaluated and was, didn't have these great steps, but I do now. But at least was trying to get there.
Yep, exactly. Okay, cool.
That was great. Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. Okay, so that's wrapped up for Dwayne. John, what worked for you tonight? on this? Oh, Dwayne, scale of 1 to 10, how effective was this for you?
A 9.
9, strong. Okay, John, what worked? If something didn't work, or what can we change or improve? And 1 to 10.
I feel very full. It's when you started talking about skills, I was going to almost mechanical skills, like learning how to use a piece of software or sharpening a knife, or those kind of skills. And so it kind of surprised me the direction this went. And
while you're thinking about that, I'm going to share a little piece about this. I went off on Christmas holidays. I took some real downtime, and I love working with wood. I am a woodworker. So that right there is a bookcase that I built. That's nice. My design build. And the match to that is right there. And there's a third one that's got, and the 3 go together to create a library wall. I love that. I love working with wood. And one of the things that I did not do well is sharpen my chisels, and literally sharpen my chisels. It's not a metaphor. I have chisels and I needed to sharpen them. And I went out and I finally bought the proper sharpening jigs for holding the chisel in place. And there are 3 edges to every chisel. There is so if a chisel is out there, actually I've got my wall up and going. So woodworking 101, but sharpening chisels is, so this is the edge. Now, really what happens here, there is the face of the chisel right here. Then there is the bevel and then the micro bevel on this, and I'm drawing that. I don't know if you guys can see that. Can you?
Yes.
Oh, you can. Good, because I can't. So the micro bevel and then the bevel, with those 3 areas on there, you wind up sharpening those effectively, and those actually, the micro bevel and the back bevel are the things that actually hold the edge, but also prevent the chisel from chipping out too far. So you don't have to resharpen everything. You want to be able to get those in there so that you actually take a look at that. And my whole thing was questioning enough to ask myself, how might I sharpen this so that I don't get chips in my chisels, because they were pretty badly dinged up. And I don't like spending hours, going back and forth and getting them so that they're all flat and true. And I don't like gouging out my stones with a chipped chisel, and I have to spend more time flattening my stones, truing my stones so that I get a perfect thing. And these things are freaking mirror finishes now. I mean, that's the beauty of these. They are polished, but the whole thing here is the same questions, what and how questions. I was noticing the same process that I did downstairs with my chisels to figure out how to do it, and then decided, okay, once I've got this whole thing, I can ask questions on Google. And sure enough, I got actual answers, but those guesses that I was coming up and creating in my mind were absolutely reinforced by master craftsmen. And I'm pretty good, but I guess at a lot of things, and I have to question to solve it, and I have to become resourceful to solve it. And those same things applied in the real world as they did with interpersonal problems. It's a process. It's a process flow of problem solving and information. And it was amazing to me. it's so universally applicable, this stuff. Okay, with that, John, you shoot it away.
Well, I think that my biggest takeaway was the
chisel thing.
Yeah, that's a lot. Of course, the chisels, but no, in an argument, being super reasonable triggers, escalates the argument. I have definitely been guilty of that. I'm going to have to look at where that came from and how I, maybe
it came from Rebecca.
What?
Yeah.
What the thought process is behind doing that. I know in the past I've got a pretty good temper, and my becoming super reasonable has been an attempt to keep from losing my temper and losing control like Jamie did. So, clearly this is a better process than either one of those. So.
Exactly, because it's not about becoming super reasonable. It's about because you're not super reasonable is a way of using wise to try and manipulate a person.
Correct.
And people feel manipulated when people are super reasonable.
That's what I was feeling. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's just infuriating. I got too many words.
No, I get that. It's because that level of calm is communicating that almost a sense of superiority.
Absolutely.
Here.
Yep. And those are the issues that if you start identifying and seek curiosity and seeking understanding, it completely undermines that, by the way. You can meet people with super reasonable manners or behaviors right out of it, because all you want to do is understand. And they go, well, all of a sudden you're not trying to compete on a super reasonable way. You're just trying to understand what they're trying to get to. And would they mind explaining it? And I'm sorry, I'm a little thick here tonight, but could you try that one more time? Because I really want to understand you. And then they go, no. And they stick to their own thing. And then you go, well, how else am I going to resolve this with you if I don't understand what your point is? So all of a sudden you've given them all the leeway in the world to fill you in, and they have to disarm in order to do that honestly, or within a range of honesty.
Yeah,
they don't even have to be totally honest with you, but they will disarm. They will take down their attack on you. That's what I mean by disarm. Okay. So yeah,
I'd say very effective. 8 for sure.
Thank you, Jamie. What worked for you tonight? And
Since
then Trevor,
you're up. Me, it was a 10 because it's so I got clarity through that. So thank you.
Well then. Okay, Trevor.
I just love how simple the topic of skill development can be when you look at it from asking questions with curiosity versus, I feel like if another group did a webinar on this, it would be a long drawn out thing about you got to do this and this and this and this big complex strategy for developing skills, whereas it's very simple. So yeah, I thought that was pretty cool.
That's one of the things that I noticed today, because I did every Tuesday I do two sort of webinars every day. I do a sales training webinar, and I do one on the Blair Dunkley experience, and Dunkley sales training, and then this one. So the whole thing was listening much deeper to people, and this one here tonight was focusing on listening to other people, because people were not getting out of control. They needed to manage and hear people deeply. Here, it was flipping it around so that it was also about listening to yourself deeply, so that you can notice where your state of mind is, and paying attention, if not listening, but deeply paying attention to yourself to notice when you're just about to be triggered, and you have a strategy now, a 4-step strategy, a battle plan, if you will, to battle yourself, not the other person,
Right.
It's not got anything to do with the other person. It's everything to do with you. So you don't abdicate your own control and give it to somebody else, or make room for them to take control for you.
Yeah, because that's what I ended up coming out with. After it all, it was all about, had nothing to do with them. That's their issue. I had to figure out me. So yeah, so that's great. Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. Okay, guys, we could, Alicia, Rebecca, Shelley, Tim, anybody there want to get, or anybody else who's on in Zoom right now, if anybody wants to get profiled, I don't mind being profiled, or has a quick issue. I've got 15 minutes, or now 10 minutes, actually. I want to wrap up at the bottom of the hour here. And if not, I'll wrap up now. So if nobody raises their hands here very quickly, or throws something in the chat box, then we'll wrap it up for the evening. Okay, well,
Looks like that's a wrap then.
Going on, yeah. Okay, guys, thanks so much for everything. Really appreciate it. Have a very good night and take care. And we'll see you guys next week.
Next week.
Okay, bye for now.